Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, we're going to talk about the very interesting offseason that the Edmonton Elks have had this year. And we're even going to talk about some stuff that is, off the field that I think is going well for this organization as of right now. But really quickly, before we get started, I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for the lack of videos the past week or so. I was actually in vacation in Arizona, of all places. Saw some really cool sights out there in the desert and just visiting my girlfriend's family down there. So it was a lot of fun, and I only had the one video that I pre-recorded. I was intending to do more, but school has gotten very busy the last little bit, so I apologize for that, guys. But content will be ramping up in the coming weeks here as we get towards the CFL draft, which we will be doing a live stream for that, and a lot of content associated with that as we get closer to the draft. So I appreciate everybody for their patience with the channel. I really appreciate it. I know we've had times where we've been very consistent in terms of 2 to 3 uploads per week, but lately it's been more like 1 upload per week. So I'm going to be trying my best to get more content out for you guys in the coming weeks. But with that said, let's get on with talking about the Edmonton Elks and their weird offseason. So I'm just going to talk about a few of their big additions this offseason on both offense and defense, and try to draw a Venn diagram in my mind about what is a correlation between a lot of these moves and kind of what the grand strategy is here under head coach Chris Jones. And then also I'm going to talk about how a change at the president level of the Edmonton Elks with Victor Cui coming aboard has made a major difference, and we'll talk about that at the end of the video. So obviously the first big domino to fall for this team this offseason was bringing back head coach Chris Jones, who won a Grey Cup as the team's head coach back in 2015 before he jumped ship to go to Saskatchewan. And, it was kind of a controversial hire, obviously, because he's rubbed a lot of people in the CFL the wrong way by, leaving jobs earlier than he really should have, jumping ship to other jobs. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he plays out here in his second tenure. But there's no doubt that Chris Jones can coach, and he has relationships around the league. And we will see that when we look right now at the free agent signings that they've made this offseason. So I wanted to first start by talking about the quarterback room that this team is bringing to camp this year. And it's going to be really interesting to see if, this is the last moves they make. But they have a lot of guys that are, very interesting athletes that they brought aboard here. And in addition to Nick Arbuckle, who is, probably the favorite to start right now. He has the most quote-unquote CFL experience out of all the guys that they have right now on the roster, but he's never truly been that number one guy. Toronto, it looked like they were going to give him that number one job to start last season, but he was, nicked up to begin the year and then struggled when he got into the lineup. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this Edmonton quarterback room plays out next season. And behind him, you got a guy like Taylor Cornelius, who showed some potential down the stretch last year in a really rough situation with last year's Elks team. Really big body, big arm, but has struggled, I think, in the pro appearances that he's had. You think about his time in the XFL with the Tampa Bay Vipers, as well as his tape last year with Edmonton. I don't think he's been overly impressive, but I think he has shown signs to give him an opportunity to compete for this job going into next season. And then aside from those guys that have the CFL experience, you have guys like Khalil Tate, who was a really athletic quarterback at the University of Arizona. You question about how he's going to convert as a passer at the pro level, and that's probably why he didn't really get the pure NFL opportunities. But you start to see a relation when you start seeing who else they signed as well. JT Barrett, a former Ohio State star, who was, again, more of that dual threat running quarterback. Barrett has shown a lot more at the college level in terms of being a passer, but you see the type of quarterback that they're bringing to camp are these guys that athletic dual threat. I think they want to try to do something like Winnipeg utilized in 2019 with Chris Streveler and, whatever other quarterback that they had in there. Use a kind of a change-up game, and I think that's their intention to do that with one of these guys. Maybe one of these quarterbacks that they bring to camp, they flip into a wide receiver or something like that in terms of the official listing on the depth chart, but they can take snaps from under center and they can get creative from that sense. So I'm really interested to see who emerges and who makes this roster ultimately at the quarterback room. And I think I'm forgetting other names as well. But these guys all have that kind of trait, except for Nick Arbuckle. I think a lot of people right now would rank it probably the worst quarterback situation in the league, other than maybe BC with the inexperience that they have there. But again, it's going to be really interesting to see how they sort this thing out and who emerges as the, starter and the guy that, is going to be the primary backup for this team going into next season. And then I think when you look at the skill guys that they're bringing to camp next year, it's really going to be important in the context of that quarterback situation that I just described. It's not the most experienced quarterback room. You're not going to expect these guys to really, elevate the players around them, at least this year. As a starter, you expect the opposite. You expect the skill position guys to really elevate their game and carry this roster. And I think that's the intention of what they went after this offseason, especially when you look at the signing of wide receiver Kenny Lawler from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who gets, a massive contract, $300,000 for next season, scheduled to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the league by a wide margin next season. It's going to be really interesting to see if he can actually be that number one guy for Edmonton like he was last season with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I mean, it could have been a classic, 1 year, not 1 year wonder, because he is a good player, but who knows if he can really replicate that success in a completely different and more challenging situation in Edmonton, where he's not going to have as good of a quarterback situation. So he is their prime free agent addition that they brought in. And then you brought back Darrell Walker, a guy that's been, one of the best receivers in the league in years past, but was definitely not that last season. I didn't include him in my top 15 wide receivers list that I did a few months ago. I just think he had a really disappointing season, looked disinterested at times, especially for the amount he was targeted. He was just not a major factor for this team last year. So I'm really interested to see how he bounces back, and he's getting a little bit older here as well. So I think those guys are going to be really, really crucial to seeing how this team turns out. And then aside from that, in the wide receiver core, you also brought in these two veteran guys, and I haven't mentioned that until now, because I just really haven't had the convenient time. I didn't have enough to say really to have a full video about them, but they brought in veteran wide receivers out of retirement, Darius Bowman and Manny Arsenault, two of the best CFL receivers of the past 10 years. But these guys have been out of the league for, at least one season each. Arsenault has not played since 2019. Of course, that's missed one season in CFL terms. And then Darius Bowman has not played since, I think it was 2018. So he's missed quite a few seasons now. And I'm kind of just, tempering my expectations for those players at this point. They're in their mid-30s. And I think that this is more of a culture thing for Chris Jones. He's really trusting his guys, and we'll talk about that more when we talk about the defensive side for this team. But I think that those are more culture fits kind of for this team. I'm not completely sure that both of these guys are going to be on the week one roster, but I think these are good guys to bring to camp. But it does bring up the question, and especially in a team like Edmonton's position that, had such a poor season last year, and that they really should be trying to uncover as many good young players as possible. That takes away a couple of training camp invites for younger players, so it's going to be really interesting to see how these roster moves play out for the Elks. But I think they have some really interesting pieces in this skill position group. And when you look in the backfield, obviously James Wilder's coming back, but I think behind him Walter Fletcher looked really, really good in his rookie season towards the end of this season at running back for the Elks. So I think they have some pieces here. But again, I think they're going to have to play and elevate the quarterback situation that I don't think looks ideal on paper for this team. And to add more intrigue to the mix, just yesterday when I was writing, kind of notes for this video, they had signed wide receiver Martavis Bryant, former Pittsburgh Steeler and former Toronto Argonaut. Technically, he was signed for last season, but didn't ever show up at Toronto Argonauts camp. I think it was reported to believe that it was a passport issue. So we'll see if he actually shows up this time for the Edmonton Elks. He's had a lot of off-field troubles in the past, but I think it's definitely a worthwhile flyer if you're the Elks, because like I said, you're trying to uncover as much hidden talent as possible, because you clearly had a gap in talent compared to the other teams in the CFL last season. And I think that Martavis Bryant could be, one of those missing pieces if he can get up here and, stay out of trouble. But just like those older guys, I'm not holding my breath for this. It's kind of just a lottery ticket. So we'll see how it works out for Edmonton. But I think that's just another interesting name to bring into camp here. Now looking at their defensive additions this offseason, and the common similarity is a lot of these guys have played in Chris Jones's scheme before at previous stops, whether that be in Saskatchewan or back when he was the head coach with the Edmonton Elks. And we'll start with the defensive line with defensive tackle McConnell Henry, a Canadian guy that comes in and fills a needed role there after they lose Kwaku Boateng to the Ottawa Redblacks in free agency. And Henry is just a really solid player, really good run-stuffing guy, but has that connection to Jones from when he was the head coach in Saskatchewan a few years back. McConnell Henry is an even better player now than he was back then, so I think that's a solid addition for Edmonton. And then the linebacking core, they bring in Dion Lacey, who played with Chris Jones, or played for Chris Jones back on that 2015 Grey Cup winning team. He had an excellent season last year in Saskatchewan, so I'm really excited to see what he can do back in that Chris Jones scheme that is very creative and maximizes the abilities of linebackers. And then, the defensive back signings, look at the veteran defensive back Ed Gainey, who comes over from Saskatchewan. This was kind of a surprise because Gainey was such a big part of that Saskatchewan Roughriders secondary for many years. He's getting up there in age, especially for a defensive back, but I think he's still one of the better defensive backs in the league. And, he comes over to Edmonton here. Again, another guy that played under Jones with the Roughriders. So, again, this is the common similarity among all these guys. And then to top it off, you have the very mysterious signing of wide receiver / defensive back Darrell Carter, who is reportedly coming in here as a full-time defensive back. But, knowing Chris Jones, we wouldn't rule it out, him playing multiple positions for this team next year if he's on the roster. And again, a lot of these guys, I'm not saying 100% that they're going to make the roster because they brought in so many wild cards to this team for training camp this year. But Carter especially, I'm just really excited to see what he can do after taking this season off. And I think he was a head coach down in Florida, a high school head coach, and we'll see what he's learned about playing the defensive back position. The last time he was in the league, he was a full-time wide receiver with the BC Lions. Had a very down season there, but he's been a Pro Bowler, not a Pro Bowler, an All-Star in the CFL before, but not at the defensive back position. So we'll see what he does when he converts to that position full-time. He has played defensive back before under Chris Jones back with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, where he used him basically everywhere as kind of a Swiss Army knife, and it's going to be really interesting to see if he does the same this year in 2022 with Edmonton. So those are some of the notable additions that they made this offseason. There's other guys like Mark Cordy, but I talked a lot about Mark Cordy in a previous video I did a few weeks ago. But when we look at this team, I think last year was just a colossal failure from a lot of respects. Just the name change, aspect obviously threw a lot of people off, and a lot of long-term fans of this team off. And I'm not going to argue with the, merits of changing the name. I think it had to be done eventually. But I think the way that they executed it was very poor. There was no build-up for the announcement of the team name. And they didn't really have a great consultancy process in terms of like the uniforms and the helmet, and they kind of changed too much of that Edmonton identity and didn't really build the bridges. And that brings me to a big move that this organization made a few weeks ago, bringing in an external guy to really reshape the image of this franchise, and Victor Cui. And I think I may be saying that wrong, but this guy, I've seen him all over social media. I've seen him make, a lot of appearances on shows and whatnot. I think on the Rod Peterson show and other podcasts. And every time I hear this guy talk, I just buy into the vision that he has for this team. He has really conducted the energy and really has his fingerprints all over this organization and what they've been able to produce in terms of their social media content and everything like that since he has been hired just a couple of months ago, if not weeks ago, has been remarkable. And one thing that they recently recently ran was a $99 promotion for season tickets. And that was for Family Day. I thought that was a great idea. And they also are going to be doing a doubleheader with the Alberta Golden Bears this season for one weekend, and I think it's they play at the Golden Bears will play their game at noon, and then the Elks will play their game against the Argos at 5. So I think that's a really great idea. I think that should be replicated across the CFL. I think especially with, the reliance of the league on the CFL draft, it's in the interest of the league. Having that collaboration between CFL and U Sports is a great idea, and merging those two fan bases together and trying to survive together and build that relationship instead of operating like separate entities like they have at certain points in the past, especially in recent memory. So I'm really interested to see how that plays out and if it's replicated around the league now that Edmonton has done it. But I think these are just great, building blocks for this organization. And you see how Victor Cui has put his fingerprints all over this organization. He's the type of guy that's been responding to fans' questions on Twitter. They've been teasing a new jersey, helmet, something they've been teasing on social media the last few days about something that they're going to reveal. They brought in past legends of the team to kind of tease, their reactions to it. So I think they're doing a great job of building up more attention around the league. And just for the CFL in general, they really need to start being more relevant around the clock, around the entire calendar year, along with stuff like the Red Blacks are doing with the Behind the R documentary. I think that stuff is great for the CFL, and we need more content like that to become more of a relevant league year-round. So I think Edmonton is doing a great job of really turning around that horrible stench that was left around last year by the very poor performance on the field, but also off the field with the name change and all the bad feelings with that, with the fan base. So I think this is great in terms of the building blocks for this organization. And I think we could see a major turnaround this year in Edmonton. And with that said, that is going to be the end of this video, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting the like button and subscribing to Untitled for more CFL content just like this. I greatly appreciate it. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on the Edmonton Elks offseason down below in the comment section. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.